Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. Our podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company and the fine folks over there, and we will talk more about them here after a bit at the conclusion of our podcast. I am Sam with Fall Obsession, and I'm your podcast host. Thank you guys for tuning in. On here today, once again, with my main man, our media production manager, Nick Powell. What's up, buddy?
Oh, what's going on?
Oh, just happy to be back on here recording another podcast. You know how it goes.
Heck yeah.
But so kind of what inspired this conversation today, if you guys have listened to some of our episodes recently, I hope that you guys, as our listeners, our viewers, have gotten the hunting camp kind of laid back camaraderie, brotherhood feel to our podcast. There's been some episodes here recently I definitely think have brought that into everything. Kind of starting, I think I'll take it all the way back to that Midwestern High crew that we had come on the podcast and just recap their snow goose hunt this past spring, 97, 98. That was just great conversation with great people. And then we took that all the way into episode 100, where we kind of used that as an opportunity for a milestone episode, and then recapped, because you were absent for episode 100, Nick. We recapped yours in 101. But those conversations we went into without a super strong agenda. We just went into them just kind of casually, just going to see where the conversation takes us. And then again in 103, when you and I sat down with Andy, and literally no notes, no agenda, no anything. We just talked. And following just these past few weeks and these podcasts in particular, I've gotten a lot of feedback from either my own friends that listen, some of our staffers, or even just folks on social media online that I know are loyal listeners, who have said, man, these episodes have been good, and saying exactly what we're hoping to accomplish in that they feel like they're sitting there with us hanging out. And that's what we're trying to bring to this podcast a little bit more. I think we get just as many people that enjoy the educational episodes whenever we have those as they do these podcasts. But I talked before we started recording kind of about some inspiration I had for this conversation, another casual conversation where you and I are hopefully just going to get to sit down and hang out and talk for a little bit. Not necessarily, I know last time just you and I did this was your episode 101 100 episode recap. So, not necessarily talking about Fall Obsession Podcast or the history of our podcast, more talking about our lives growing up, our lives getting into hunting, and how it has all brought us here, both in and outside of Fall Obsession, if that makes sense. So I think a great spot to kick off a casual conversation is just at the beginning, and how we got into hunting. And let's start with each of us talking about our very first memory that we have related to hunting.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I'll kick it off with actually the first deer that I ever killed in my entire life. I was 8 years old, and we had this big lease that we basically had access to. It was through the company that my dad worked for, and it was I think it was around 10 or 11,000 acres, so it was a big area. There had been a lot of big deer killed on this place, and so my dad had been going there for years, was very familiar with it, would take us out there every now and then, and that wasn't the first place we ever hunted on. We had another lease when I was really small. I barely remember that one because they would hardly ever take me into the blind, because obviously we know little kids in the blind are not a good mix. But So this is the first memory that I'm very fond of, and I remember it like it was yesterday. So there's the ranch that they had leased. Had a lot of very, very large grain fields, and that was one way that they would work this land. They would run cows on it, and they would also run grain on it. And so multiple different types of grain, whatever, I guess the market called for at the time, didn't really matter. But and that was like I remember that was one of my like favorite places to hunt, because you just sit on the edge of one of these grain fields, or maybe like 50 yards back in the trees where these deer pass and go in to eat at night. And it seemed like every time we would drive up to one of these grain fields, there would just be deer all over it. And so my very first deer, I was finally old enough to hunt, and this is when I want to say it's when the state of Texas started enforcing every hunter above the age of like 18 had to have hunter's safety. And so like me, my dad's friend, we all took hunter's safety together. And I'll never forget it. It was like my local ag teacher was a hunter safety instructor. And so like we went to our local high school, sat down in a group of like maybe 10 to 12 old guys and me. and we all sat through the whole class, and I ended up scoring the highest out of the entire room. So
oh boy.
I'll never forget that. Like my dad and his friend got 99s and I got 100. And so like I was able to rub that in their face. But anyways, we went and sat on one of these grain fields. That was a little rabbit trail. Sorry about that. But we went and sat on one of these grain fields, and it was getting to the evening time, and I actually still have this deer on my wall today. But we went and sat, and we were in a ground blind, probably 20 or 30 yards back into the trees on the edge of this grain field. And so what we were trying to do was catch these deer coming onto this grain field for the evening, for them to eat for the night. And so we see this 8-point buck coming up to this grain field. And before he even passes us to get on the grain field, my dad says, "Hey, you see that buck right there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I see him." And so I poked my little 6mm up out of the blind. I aim at him. I see him in my crosshairs, and I pull the trigger, and that dude runs straight for the grain field all the way out, like in the middle of this field. And it's a huge field, like gigantic. And he runs out, and my dad goes, "Did you hit him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And so we wait a little bit till it gets pretty close to dark, and we hop out of the ground blind, and we start walking towards the grain field and tracking him, whatever. And then we ended up actually finding him. It wasn't that great of a shot, being an 8-year-old, but it did the trick. And so yeah, that was the first deer I ever killed, was a little 8-point buck. And I got a picture of, or I have him on my wall. I'll send you a picture of him just so you can see what he looks like. But yeah, I'll never forget that story.
That's awesome. Very first deer. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, my first one is my earliest memory is not my first deer. It's actually the first time my dad ever took me out in the woods, because when I was growing up, I was born in Texas, but when I was really, really little, my parents moved up to Wyoming, and we lived up in Wyoming for 4 years. And looking back on it, like it was like from ages 3 to 7 or 8, like somewhere in there.
Okay.
So I never went hunting while I was up there, and looking back on, I'm like, man, I really everything worked out the way it was supposed to in my life for sure, and I wouldn't change anything. But it would have been really cool to live up there when I was like a teenager, and could have taken more advantage of, the hunting that area has to offer. But
Absolutely.
Anyway, when we came back to Texas, my dad was he was a pastor at a church, and one of the guys in the church, like pretty much as soon as we moved in, settled in that first fall, he was like, "Hey, I want to take y'all, you and your boy to my deer lease and let you shoot a whitetail." He was like, "Oh, okay, cool, just a doe, put some meat in the freezer, whatnot."
Yeah.
And so my dad, I want to say I was 7, I think, at this time. And so my dad was like, hey, you want to go? And I'd never been hunting. I'd seen my dad bring back like pheasants and stuff up in Wyoming whenever he went hunting up there, but I'd never gone. So I was like, yeah, I'll go. I had no idea what to expect. I just knew you wore camo and went out in the woods. That's about as much as I knew about it. So we Ken was this gentleman's name. He takes us out there, and we're pulling, I want to say, from my recollection, we're pulling into the place, and we have to pass by this field that's out there, and it's probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's a bunch of does grazing out in that field that's on the property that we're able to hunt. So he pulls in. He's like, hey, we can kind of come up this creek bed and come through this tree line. You can hopefully get a shot. So I remember going up through the creek, and I'm just tagging along behind him and everything, and my dad gets right up there on the edge. I never got to watch the actual shot. They made me stay down in the creek. So my dad takes a shot and drops this doe. So we go and walk up to it and everything, and my dad, like, I'll have to have him back on here to talk about some of this, but he likes to talk about how, he wasn't really sure what to expect from me, with dead animal and everything, first time and stuff. And so we go up, we get the deer, and we got to field dress it. So and I think I told this a couple of weeks ago when I podcasted with Delaney. He was like, hey, you can stay back by the creek, you don't have to stay up here while we dress it out or anything, and he explained to me what they were going to do. And by the time he was done dressing it out, I was looking over his shoulder, like I was curious. I wanted to know, I wanted to see and everything. So we put one on the ground then, and then later that evening, we went and sat in a box blind, hunting some corn. And I remember my dad had to wake me up once or twice, I think, because I was dozing off and my head was rubbing against the side of the blind and making all this noise and everything, and I was snoring at another point, and he had to wake me up. So I remember him waking me up, and then finally I think I dozed off and I woke up on my own. I looked out, and there's a deer standing out there, and I looked at my dad. My eyes were about this big around. I was like, there's a deer out there. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna shoot it. So he gets his gun up, shoots another doe. So that was my first time to go hunting, the only time we went that year. And then the next year, that gentleman actually was able to get my dad and I on that deer lease with him. Nice. And my dad was like, do you have any interest in hunting? Do you want to hunt this year? And I was like, yeah, I want to try it. And so he told me, he's like, after you kill your first deer, at that point, I'll start letting you spread your wings and you can hunt by yourself, but you're hunting with me until you kill your first deer. And so that year was a very long season. I think it was a couple days after Christmas before I finally put a deer on the ground. That was after several missed shots throughout that year. So, but I finally got done on a big old doe at the end of that season, and kept killing from there, I guess.
Nice.
So
that's what I'm talking about.
But no, man, it's those memories, like you sit down, you think back on stuff like that, and that's why I enjoy conversations like this, but then this podcast too, because just depending on who you're podcasting with, it's like it sparks memories back in your own mind of your own experiences and stuff over time. And some of this stuff, I remember my first year, but how often do I, like I just did, walk back through my first little beginning to be a hunter experience?
Exactly.
I don't do that a whole lot, and it's kind of a stroll down memory lane for sure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah, and it's everybody's lives are so busy nowadays, it seems like, and it's nice to just sit back and reminisce on like what we all did and what we all went through and got to experience, and just get to experience all over again. So
yeah.
Cool.
I have another memory that just popped into my mind. I cannot, in 100 episodes, for all I know, I could have told this story on the podcast before. I really don't remember. But I think it was probably my third or fourth year hunting out there. I'm not sure. I think I was 11 or 12, 13, somewhere in there at this point, probably 12. And we had a rule on the place, kind of like you and I have on our place with our dads now. If the guys aren't there, You know, like if I'm not there, you can hunt my stuff. You know, you can hunt
Right.
my stands. We're not trying to be stand hogs or anything. And that same kind of standing gentleman's agreement was at this lease that we were on. And I'll tell this story now that, you know, I have a platform and potentially this guy could hear this podcast at this point. But so there's this one guy on the lease, I won't name names. One guy on the lease who had a stand, and that evening my dad was like, "Hey, you want to hunt this stand?" I said, "Yeah, I'll hunt there." Rifle hunt. I wasn't a bow hunter at this point. So I go up there. My dad drops me off at the bottom of this hill, you know, at the main road, so I can walk in, carry my chair and everything in there. And I get to the stand. There's a padlock on the stand, and it's like, come on, man, really? And at this point, like, it's getting to the time where I need to be in a stand, and another stand is a long way away, and I would be kind of walking over my dad's area a little bit if I tried to move. So I was like, screw it, I'm gonna hunt here anyway. So I sat my chair down right next to that guy's stand, just sat down in front of it. So I'm sitting there, and pretty early on, I remember a doe I want to say it was windy that day, and a doe kind of came out for a quick minute, and she was real skittish and left and everything. And we're getting right to that last light, you know, that prime time, if you will. And I look off to my left, and the grass is probably like waist high or more. Like it's tall, blowing in the wind. And I just see these dark chocolate antlers moving through that grass, and I was like, oh my gosh. About the time I look, this head comes up and looks at me, and I'm like, that's a good buck. Like, outside his ears and everything. And he turns, and as soon as he turns, I throw my gun up, and I couldn't see his body or anything. And at that time, like, my dad and I, we weren't into shoulder mounts or anything like that. You know, we were meat hunters, you know, still are.
Yeah.
But I throw my gun up and I put it right behind his ear and pull the trigger, and that thing, boom, drops right in that grass.
Heck yeah.
That's him right there.
Okay.
Big old chocolate horn 10. That was the first buck of a decent size that I actually ever killed. I just now realized that looking at the podcast video that he's actually behind me right now. But
That worked out.
I remember that's one of those memories that just popped in my mind. But that was my first decent sized buck that I ever killed was that big old chocolate horn 10. He was an old deer too. If I can find the picture of him, I'll post it in with this episode or something, because like you can see all the gray in his face and everything, and like I think we put him at like probably 7 years old or something. So he was he was a mature deer for sure, old warrior. But
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of stories of like memories that I have, and I'm like, I've already told this on the podcast. I've already told that one on the podcast.
I don't remember if I've told that one on the podcast or not. What I wanted.
I don't think so.
Yeah, who knows? Like, I've gone off on so many rabbit trails on our podcast that it's just like, man, I'll say it again. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I know what we've talked about doing, and we've mentioned this previously, is that we need to find a time, and it might even at this point be until fall, but a time when we're like maybe all four of us, you and me and our dads, are out there at the lease or something. We can get all four on a podcast or something. I know I want to get my dad back on here too, and because just again, some of these old stories are just they're too.
Yeah, and I know my dad has some, and he'd be able to talk more about like the big ranch we used to hunt on, and then the lease, because we had a lease down in San Saba as well. And he was very familiar with that one. And it's funny because, like, at least in San Saba, the only thing I remember about it is what we would stay in, like what we would sleep in at night. And it was this old, like, rat-infested school bus. And, like, I mean, it was not warm at night or anything. Like, it was rough in it. Like, we might as well have set up a tent, because that's, it's as good as that. Just using the bathroom outside, the whole deal. Like, it was rough. That's the only thing I remember about that whole lease. But that was when I was like real little, like, I don't know, probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, we our first lease, this property I've been talking about, it was down in Central Texas, probably I guess it's around 4 hours south of the Dallas Fort Worth area. So it was a haul down there, but it was a really good place. It was 300 something acres, and pretty good mix of like hills and fields and hardwoods, cedars, like mesquite thickets. It had a lot of stuff. I encourage our listeners, I want to do this real quick, to go back and listen all the way to episode number 3, because I had my dad on. That was the first time my dad ever came on the podcast, and during that podcast, him and I talked about a lot of these old stories. I've had a couple float in my mind since we've been talking that I want to tell, but they've been told in episode 3, and they're told better by my dad. So I either want our listeners to go back and listen to episode 3, or we'll wait and have my dad tell them again when he's on here next. But that property was prime for us. We've hunted a couple different places since then, in between then and the Texas dirt property we're on now. But smaller tracks, nothing that big, and certainly not as big as what we have now, what we're working with. But I remember we varied a lot in that after I killed my first deer, I started hunting by myself pretty much all the time. And we looked at, again, we're meat hunters. We're out there having fun, building memories and everything, but at the same time we're filling the freezer. So we split up, cover more ground and everything. Yep. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that it was really kind of hitting me how long it had been since I hunted with my dad. It had really been almost a decade probably since we spent a lot of time. We'd be in camp, but then especially after I started driving, in high school, it was I'm gone, I'm going hunting, and my dad would be at work. And so it was, it was the bond and relationship was still there, but it had grown farther apart, and not intentionally, but just how it had happened. And I remember we didn't have a lease for a couple years, and our family's birthday present to my dad talks about this hunt in episode 3, but our birthday present to my dad was a whitetail hunt down in South Texas. So I got to go down there with him and spend 3 days actually in a blind videoing for him on this hunt. And it's actually in season 2, I think, of our Fall Obsessed Outdoors series that we used to run. It's on our website and our YouTube channel. Guys can go watch it. But got him a buck, really fun trip. We had a blast getting to hang out. And I think that's when it kind of hit both of us. It was man, we need to get a deer lease again. We need to get back into this together and get back on it. And so it's been really cool in going into the first year now with you. And I know all 4 of us hadn't even shared a hunting camp as 4 people yet, but being on the Texas dirt property now down here with you and your dad, it's at least given us the opportunity to be able to do that. Because I think, especially after rifle season opened, most every trip that I took out there, he was with me or I was with him. So it was
that's cool. And I haven't even been out there. I think when we went to first look at the property to see if we even wanted to lease it, that was the only time that we've been out there together. And so this was I don't know, probably a year ago now, because I know probably more than a year ago. I think it was April, maybe. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it was around a year, April or May.
Yeah,
I think.
And so I've been out there with my wife one time, and then I've been out there by myself one time, and that's all that because last year I was being greedy and going after the big Collin County buck.
Man, rightfully so, man. You had a freaking big deer out close to home that you were trying to kill, so I'd probably be doing the same.
Yeah, and life had happened. I had just had my second kiddo in June of last year, and so it was I really needed to be home, and hunting Collin County is just close, and so that was just the easier opportunity to get in the woods. And so I could run out there, sit for a few hours, and run home and do what I needed to do. And so that was just what was easier for my family. And I think this season I'll be out there a lot more than I was this past season. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Man, I know we've talked about our plans and everything coming up, which I'm still planning on going out on June 11th and
Yep.
and doing a work day out there. I don't know if my dad's going to get to go with his work or anything. Well, that's to be determined. But and I hope you're going too. I know we talked about it, but
We have. I need to nail it down.
yeah. But all as to say, rabbit trail, like we always do.
Like we always do.
For our listeners, for our viewers, we're about to start working on this property that you guys have seen us work on already in season 1 of Texas Dirt. June 11th, we'll be filming episode 1 of season 2 of Texas Dirt, and getting ready to kick off another year out there and everything, and putting in a day out there. But all as to say, you know, just the opportunity to build something from the ground up, you know, is, like we've said so many times on here, is just, it's invaluable in my opinion, for sure. And I'm excited to see what we do with it. I know, and I don't even know how I got off of it, but this was gonna be my main point just a few minutes ago, and somehow that changed. But when we were out on that property down in Central Texas, that first year, at least we didn't have a shelter or anything out there, so we camped out there. And my dad, we both have some crazy tent stories from out there, and how we've had to deal with weather, and finding out that our tent's a little too close to a dried up creek bed, and, you know, stuff like that. Again, stories that I'm not going to tell either without my dad here, or guys can go listen to episode 3. But now we have this camper out there that will be in, and I know my dad and I made several comments last year about how, man, we couldn't go back to tent camping. It'd be too hard. And honestly, right, before we got the camper, I think we did spend one night out there in a tent, and it was like, man, we're not as cut out for this as we used to be. My dad's a little bit older, and I guess I'm a little more bougie or something. I don't know, but I'm right there with you. That camper definitely saved us a lot of trouble and a lot of cold nights on the ground. So
we still have our feelers out. We're planning on getting one too, and so me and my dad are going to go halvesies on one. And so if any of our listeners out there got a camper they want to sell for cheap or even donate, we are open to that.
Let me be clear: you're donating to the Nick and Robbie Powell Foundation. You're not donating to Fall Obsession with that.
That's right. We need to make that clear. This is definitely to me and my dad.
This is a personal cry for help, is what this is.
It is. I'm right there with you on the bougie thing. Like I had to. I stayed in my truck for one night, and that was cold. And so, like, tent camping, I'm like, you know.
Man,
rather not.
Yeah, you just get you a basic little camper out there, a little heater, and you'll be squared away.
Yep, that's all I need. I did learn my family, like my parents, my sisters, and my little sister's boyfriend all went out there turkey hunting.
Oh yeah,
this spring. And my little sister got her first turkey. I'll have to have her on here to tell that story, because it's kind of a funny story. They told it to me, but I don't want to tell it.
Yeah, don't take anything away from it. We'll save it for her.
And so they actually found, because there's only like, I want to say there's like 2 motels in the town, because our deer lease is not very far from town. So there's 2 motels in this little small town, but there is also a Airbnb house that you can rent, and it's
no kidding.
And it's trying to think of how it ended up being cheaper, because with all of them going out there, they would have had to gotten 2 rooms.
2 rooms, yeah.
And so the house was cheaper per night than it was for 2 rooms at the motel. The nicer motel, there's one that's like you don't really want to stay at,
quote unquote nicer.
Right, yeah. Neither of them are very nice, but they're better than tent camping.
It's a small Texas town, so
it is. But yeah, there's one Airbnb house in this little town, and so and they rented it, and so it was actually a pretty sweet deal.
That's good to know, for sure.
Yeah.
If we have any guests come out there eventually that need a setup, that might come in handy. So
for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to have her, and I know I've mentioned it to you previously about her successful turkey hunt, and then some of her deer hunts from last year too. We'll have to get you to do a brother sister podcast with her. But it was so ironic because our conversation with Andy, we had just gotten done talking about how there's no turkeys out there. We rarely see any. Nick's dad even went out there and didn't see any. And then you made the comment, hey, at the time we were recording, you're like, hey, next weekend, they're going out there for one more try. And sure enough, they freaking smoked one.
Sure enough, you got one.
Yeah. So I was like, well, dang it.
And it's a pretty entertaining story of how it all played out. So y'all look forward to that one.
Yeah, be looking for that one in the coming weeks. We'll try to make that happen. So, well, man, what else you got?
Hey, I was going to ask you about how's moving into the new place going.
Oh yeah, well, if you're watching the podcast video, which you should be watching the podcast video, if you're not, you will notice I am in a different environment than I have been with my previously plain brown walls that were behind me. But no, it's going good, man. We're in a really awesome place. Like I'm look out my window here that's behind the camera, and I got just my front pasture and trees and fields across the road that I can look at, and look out my back door and I'm looking at my trees, so it's a small place. It's 2.5 acres. But it is what we've been looking for and what we've been working toward and everything. So we're really excited. The house is pretty squared away. And obviously it did not take me long to put my mounts on the wall. So I got to put these in my home office now instead of them being in the game playroom that we had in the old house, because this house is a bigger house, but it doesn't have a gamer playroom like the other house. It's like it's a bigger house, but it's got one less room. Just all the rooms are bigger, I guess, is how that works. I don't know.
I'll take a bigger room for sure.
But my wife took my pronghorn mount from 2018 and my 2 biggest deer that I've killed. They made the cut to be in the living room. So they are on display high up on the wall in the living room, and any future larger, nicer mounts can
join
them. Otherwise you get bumped down here to the backup squad in the office.
The B team.
Yeah, the B team. So but no, it makes for a good podcast drop. Again, I pointed out that one buck earlier in the episode, so if you aren't watching the video, at least go back and check it out to see the new setup and see that one buck in particular I'm pointing out. And then this wall is blank right now, but this one's gonna have some of my archery accomplishments from previous years put up there, and then the rest of the office can be firefighter stuff, I guess. But no, it's been going good. That we've unpacked. We've been in this house for a week now, and we've unpacked pretty quick. I mean, it's been some long days and late nights and everything, but we've unpacked pretty quick. We had our first full day in the house. We had a little incident where I guess our washing machine, we brought our old washer and dryer with us from the old house, and it got damaged in the move. We didn't know it. No obvious damage, but I hook it up first day, turn the water on to the washer and everything. Everything's good. So we had a front load, so I left the door open like you're supposed to, so it doesn't get all gross and nasty in there. Walk away, working in the garage, working on the other end of the house, and we don't have any food because we just moved, so we're getting cleaned up and getting ready to go to dinner that night. And I walk through the living room and I hear what sounds like a toilet running, and I'm like, probably a handle needs to be jiggled or something. So I walk to this end of the house, and toilet's not running, but I hear water now. And I walk down the hallway, and the whole laundry room is flooded with water. Jeez. And my daughter's bedroom is flooded with water, and the door to the washer's open. Water is just pouring out of it, and it's not on or anything. We never ran it. We never turned it on. We hooked it up, and that was it.
Yeah.
So shut the door, freak out moment, and then we clean it up, and did not go to the dinner we were hoping to go to that night, just in case y'all were wondering. We and I know this has nothing to do with hunting, but this is just my life. We end up pulling the washer and dryer out, and that night, was it that night or the next day? I don't even remember now. Maybe that night. we perused like Facebook Marketplace and stuff for a used one. We bought these used, and they'd worked pretty well for us up to that point. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm done with this. I'm gonna get a new one. So, sure enough, we go out and took advantage of some Memorial Day weekend sales. But
There you go.
I could fix it, but I was like, man, I'll never trust that thing again. So I'm officially away from the front load. So I was just like, whatever valve is in there that just keeps that water in check, I guess it got busted enough that it was under pressure for long enough, it broke all the way. And
I got
so, because after we got all cleaned up, I shut the door and I turned the water back on without turning the washing machine on, and water was just filling the drum. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I got a problem.
Yep.
But other than that, that's the only problem we've run into so far. Knock on wood. So we'll see. Hopefully that stays strong. But no, it's hopefully my last move for a long time, if ever. So
yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for in our next move. Is going to be last one for a long time.
Yeah.
So happy for you, man. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're happy. We're settling in, and hopefully I'll be able to get back in the groove of things with Fall Obsession here in the coming weeks, and get back in my routine. So
there you go. Yeah,
once
you get all the kinks worked out, then you'll be good to go.
Yeah, I texted for our listeners. I texted Nick today, and I was like, because before I moved, we recorded several episodes in advance, so we'd be good through the move. Recorded with Delaney and Andy and Tyler and Kim, and I was like, oh crap, we published the last one last Monday or last week. I was like, I gotta figure something out. So a few hours later, here we are. But
made it happen.
Yeah, made it happen. And man, like I said, these conversations are this is what I enjoy, because it's just, this is hanging out with good people is what it is. And we will we got some cool stuff in the works schedule wise for coming episodes as well. Next week our podcast guest, she's from the Pacific Northwest, kind of a very specific niche up there, so looking forward to recording with her. And then also trying to get our staffer Brendan Scott back on the podcast, because he just had a successful Montana bear hunt. And if you've listened to any of Brendan's episodes in the past, he's a good storyteller. So it's bound to be a good time.
They are all entertaining.
Yeah. And then, as we already mentioned, Nick and his sister, try to get them on the calendar for some time in the near future. And I'm sure that something will stem possibly off of our workday trip out at the lease coming up later this month. So.
Oh yeah.
We try to keep the content relevant to what's going on and what the season is. But like today, every once in a while, it's cool to reminisce and kind of look back. And it's fun to think about where we've come from, because you and I didn't know each other at all growing up or anything like that. We met through work and everything. And I think where we kind of figured out how much we both loved hunting was when we went to paramedic school together. So that was 6 months of torture that that helped with the bond a little bit. So
something going through the hard times will bring you closer for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think medic school was when you decided to join Fall Obsession as a staffer, and then I coerced you, I guess, into taking on more responsibility for less reimbursement, or however it works. So it is what it is right now. We all know how we feel about that.
Exactly. It's been a good time anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll keep doing it. We'll keep plugging away, and hopefully, like we just mentioned, we got some awesome content coming up and some exciting things this summer, whether it's with the podcast or with the lease, whatever it might be. So, and unrelated to either of those, Drew, I'll send you the picture when we get off, and I know it'll probably be on our social media soon. Drew is in Texas right now on an axis deer hunt.
Oh, that's right.
And 20 minutes into his hunt, he shot a 35-inch axis.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Freaking lucky.
And didn't he get that in an auction or something like
Yeah,
that?
it was
that had a steal of a deal.
steal of a deal, and then I think he was supposed to go last year and it didn't work out, so he's going this year and everything. So he's been texting me these last couple of days talking about it and everything, and I'm sure he'll be back on here too to recap that, because that's a pretty awesome opportunity he got to go on.
Yeah, I think it was either COVID or the freeze last year.
Yeah.
Put a halt to
It
that,
was the freeze, that's what it was.
because that freeze jacked up some of those exotic herds pretty bad. So
Jacked up a lot of things, man, for sure.
Yeah.
But now we'll get him back on here. And another quick update, Andy, if you're listening, Nick and I put in for our Montana pronghorn tags. So
yes,
nobody else put in. Nobody else put in.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, we need our chances
the best odds I can.
the chances to be the best they can. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I'll take it to home here for our listeners. We appreciate you guys listening or watching, whatever the case might be. If you guys have not already, go to fallobsession.com. That's our website, and check it out. We have all of our content on there, literally covering hundreds of different topics in the hunting and outdoor industry. So go check it out. Video series, recipes, educational articles, other kinds of media. Our podcasts are on there, you name it, we got it. fallobsession.com/podcast is where you guys can go to actually listen to our podcast, to watch the podcast videos on the website, or to send us feedback on the podcast, guest or topic suggestions. All that stuff is welcome. There's a form on there you guys can fill out. Also, while you're there, head on over and pick you up some new Fall Obsession swag. I'm rocking the Midwestern High t-shirt design, as well as our latest and greatest hat, the Desert Hunter Trucker hat, I think is what we called it. And we got several other designs in stock, as well as some older t-shirt designs that are marked down and like less than $10 for a t-shirt. So with as much as prices are going up and everything, take advantage of that. Can't beat it. So
it's a darn good deal.
Absolutely. Whatever podcast platform you're listening on, be sure you follow and subscribe. We're on all major podcast platforms, as well as our YouTube channel. Our podcast videos are on there, so be sure that you go check that out. And we are also now on Waypoint TV, which is a streaming service for hunting. Golly, I said that wrong. I didn't like the way I said that. Is a streaming service for hunting media. You don't have to edit that out. Guys can just hear me have a stroke over here on the freaking mic. But a streaming service for hunting media. We're now on there, Fall Obsession Podcast. So another outlet that you guys can go to listen to our podcast. Other social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on those. Go follow and subscribe. Also check us out on Go Wild, which is a censorship-free hunting and outdoor app. So be sure that you guys head on over there, create an account. It's free if you haven't already, and they got a pretty cool reward system where you guys, the more you post, you can start earning rewards and stuff like that. So it's pretty neat. Last but not least, Ridge Rock Hunt Company. I'm normally rocking the Ridge Rock hat, but I'm not today because it's packed and I don't know where it is. But Derek and Lacey out there in Mississippi, they take really good care of us, and they're really good friends of us. They book hunts anywhere in the country. Anything that you want to hunt, wherever you want to go check him out. Give Derek a call, and he will find something that works for you in your budget. And on top of that, all of his outfitters in his network are outfitters that he himself has personally hunted with, or someone he knows and trusts has hunted with, and they come with a recommendation. So he guarantees that you will have a good experience when you book through him. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company, check them out on social media and their website. Nick, thanks again, buddy. I enjoyed it, as always.
Yeah, I'm always glad to be on here.
Yeah, we'll be doing it again sometime in the near future for sure. So,
heck yeah.
All right, guys, thank y'all for listening. And as always, we're back again next Monday for another Fall Obsession podcast episode, and we will catch you then.
See you later.